All right, so this was our starter for today. This is Jamie says that 0.51 repeating is an irrational number because the decimal repeats. Do you agree? Explain why or why not. So what we're going to do is go through just a process of making sure that we thoroughly answer, explain questions. It says explain, justify, all of that. So we have a new little graphic organizer. In this bubble up here, we're going to write the main idea. Here's what I think. So you guys already worked through this starter a little bit in your own words. So you all agreed that you thought that Jamie was wrong. So I would put, here's what I think. I'm going to put Jamie, I think I just spelled it differently. We'll spell it the way it was. Jamie is wrong. That's what I think. If it says, do you agree, you could say, I don't agree. Something to that effect. You really need to start with, I don't agree. I think he's wrong. And really state that, because that's the first question that's asked. Do you agree? No, I think Jamie's wrong. So I just putting that main idea in there, you all agreed on that. Okay? So you want to make sure that you're actually stating that somewhere very clearly. And then we can go through our reasons. So when we start looking at our reasons, there's a couple of things that we can do. So reason number one, you guys all talked about repeating decimals. So the reason that you said that it was wrong was because irrational numbers do not repeat. And then your evidence over here, I'm just going to write it out this way. There is a repeating bar, exclamation point. So pretty much you have a counterexample, is what we call this. Like there's a repeating bar. You can totally justify it with one reason. There's actually one other way that we could prove that this is not irrational. So when we think about the definition of an irrational number, do you remember what the definition said? Yes.
It said that an irrational number?
Yeah, either one. Well, irrational just isn't rational. So what was rational?
A number is a number that can be written as a fraction, and the decimal is a
Good. So the rational numbers can be written as a fraction. And so we can put down, okay, irrational numbers can't be written as a fraction. And I think TJ actually did have that in your little paragraph too, didn't you? And so our evidence for why this is not irrational is we would then write this as a fraction. So do you remember the trick for repeating decimals and how to write it as a fraction? There's two digits there. What would go in the... Yeah, 51 over 99. Now I do think that reduces, but we don't even need to worry about that. We can show, hey, I know with repeating decimals, I can write this as a fraction. And so there's my evidence. And so you guys actually did really, really well with this problem. And I think it's because you understand this concept. We've been working on it for a few days. When I think about justifying this, we want to work towards a short paragraph. I know, but you guys really were writing enough to be a paragraph. Mm-hmm. Like, you just start off with, first you tell if you believe if they're right or wrong, and include some details maybe about why. And then you're going to go through your evidence, reason one, reason two. Sometimes you may only have one reason. If you're saying something is wrong, one reason's usually enough. But if we're trying to be thorough, we could include a little bit more. And so let's just look at what that paragraph could look like. So on the attached page, I put a lot of lines. We're actually not going to use all of this today, but I wanted it to be big enough to do some other problems later. Okay, so we're going to start off with, what do we believe? So it says in the question, if we just go back, Jamie believes 0.51 repeating is an irrational number because the decimal repeats. Do you agree? So we might start off with using those words. I do not agree. I think 0.51 repeating is rational, not irrational, which seems kind of redundant, but that's just like the first piece. You say yes or no, and then you say, I think it's rational. So that's different than what Jamie thought. And so I actually made that kind of into 2 sentences, but that just answers the do you agree part. And then we can start putting in those other pieces. And I just want us to be thoughtful about how we set this up. I'm not so much worried about grammar and punctuation, although that does help make our thoughts a lot clearer. What I'm thinking about mostly is that we have all the details and that we're using the correct vocabulary. That's really the things that, when I look at our results on assessments and things with the writing in math piece, that I think is probably missing. If I look at the rubrics for practice items, what they're looking for is all those little details. Do you have the vocabulary? Are you using certain words? And so we can just go into our reasons. And I could almost make this like a bulleted list. It wouldn't even have to be really a paragraph. Like it could say, okay, I answered the question. And then we could come down and do another bullet and just say what we did before. Irrational. And I'm actually going to write the word numbers instead of using the hashtag just because we're writing. So irrational numbers do not have. Now you guys said irrational numbers do not repeat. We really need to focus on which part of the number is repeating. It's not the whole number part. It's the decimal parts. They do not have repeating decimals. So that's a word that I think has been missing a lot in some of our explanations. We really want to be thoughtful about it. Irrational numbers do not have repeating decimals. And we, then you can say 0.51 has a repeating decimal. So that just kind of goes together. It has a repeating bar. You could even mention that. It has a repeating bar, therefore it repeats, therefore it's not irrational. And honestly, if you're proving something wrong, you could probably stop there. One counterexample, one way of saying it is there. If we're thinking about being thorough, though, you could also go back to that definition and do one more little bullet point. This really isn't like a huge paragraph. It's just little quick things. You could also just say irrational numbers cannot be written. And then it doesn't actually say as a fraction in our definition. It says as the ratio of two integers. So we'll move from that fraction to cannot be written as the ratio of two integers. Now, if you were in a testing situation and you can't remember all the right words, you have to do the best you can. But these words, if we go back to the definition, is important. Because if we just said fraction, that might mean like a fraction inside a fraction or a decimal inside a fraction. And then we could say 0.51 repeating can be written as 51 over 99. And then that just sort of proves the point. We said whether we agreed or not. We gave lots of evidence. And so if you're proving something wrong, you really would only need one really solid thing. If you were in an assessment situation and you knew something else, I would go ahead and include it, just in case you messed something else up. Be as thorough as possible. And this is just for arguments for anything. If you're trying to convince somebody that you're right, evidence, 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 that's how you win an argument. And this is how you win a math argument.